Hello and welcome to the latest Science of Sport podcast. I'm your host Matt Solomon, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Michel Verkade. So Michel is a former PE teacher turned strength and conditioning coach, and he specialises in strength and conditioning for swimmers. Recently, he's been at the Olympics and the Paralympics, where his athletes have won a number of medals, and I'm fortunate enough to call him my colleague. I've seen firsthand some of his excellent strength training sessions, and that's why I wanted to bring him today onto the show. So without further ado, it's time to welcome him onto the show. Michel, welcome to the Science of Sport podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you very much. So, can you give us a quick introduction as to who you are and what you've been up to until now?
Of course. I'm Michel. I'm a former PE teacher. I'm working in elite sports for 10 years now, I guess. Got some experience in volleyball, worked with some motorsport athletes, but my main focus is working on water-based sports, especially waterpolo and swimming. And what I told you, I'm doing that for 10 years now, so I think I know something about it.
more than some other people potentially. And obviously you were just spending 3.5 weeks with me at the Paralympics as well, so that was super fun. Can you tell us a little bit about all of that?
Yeah, of course. Being in the games is also always a special experience. Of course, hardworking, but I've seen a lot of good races, and the atmosphere in Paris was amazing. I've seen almost every stadium was fully booked every day, and the French crowd was amazing. So no, three good, really, really good weeks, especially because the results for us were also quite good.
So certainly can't complain. So when it comes to S&C in swimming, obviously it's not a land-based sport, right? So most sports you're looking at some kind of force into the ground. Potentially there's a little bit of that in swimming, but not much when they get going. So can you talk us through what the key physical characteristics are that the swimmers need to optimize their performance?
Well, of course, when you look in S&C in swimming, swimming is known of training in big volumes. So my first priority is make sure that they can handle all those volumes. So they used to be like 25 to 30 hours a week being in the water. So I think that's a lot, especially when it comes to the shoulders and the hips. It takes a lot of them. So first of them, trying to make the robustness just that good, to make sure they don't get injured with those volumes. But what you said, yeah, pushing against the water is really different than pushing against the floor. So basically, depending on the distance, what they do, because if they do a 50-meter sprint, of course they need to be stronger than when they do a 400-meter freestyle or something like that. So it depends, but the main focus is maintaining strength, be stronger like every athlete, I think. But especially when we focus on is focusing on the starts, focusing on the turns. I think those are the key points for S&C, especially for strength training in swimming, because that's the point where you can make a difference.
And what happens in those moments which makes it some kind of strength or power type movement?
Sorry?
So when they're starting, for example, they're kind of they jump in, right?
Yeah.
What's the influence of strength and power on that performance? Because you're playing with tiny fractions per second. How do you then improve those physical qualities to improve the jump in as such?
Yeah. Well, of course, it's all depending on the techniques, of course. But if you jump further, if you got a longer flight time, it's beneficial because you got less resistance. And for example, in a 50-meter freestyle, it's like 24% of your total time is only the start, the first 50 meters. So that can be really beneficial if you jump further than other competitors, for example. On the other hand, if you do a 400-meter freestyle, every time you make a turn, you can push against the wall. So if you push harder than them, it's going to be really beneficial for the end time, because it takes less energy and you can push harder. So it gives you ahead of the rest.
And when it comes to the resistance of that, obviously on the one hand you've kind of got like this sideways type jump into the water. that's maybe body weight or something around body weight. But when it's in the water in the turn, you're resisted by the water itself, and gravity plays less of a role. So, what kind of resistance are you looking at when you're hitting a turn?
Yeah, of course, the resistance of the water itself. So you need to be in a I don't know how you call it, like a streamline, I guess. And it has to be really, really focused on. So you have to be really tight. Your core has to be really tight, so that the water flows around you on the upper side and the other side with the less resistance you got. So, but of course, there's more resistance. I don't know the exact figures about how more the resistance is than basically jumping in the air. But yeah, definitely there's more.
And obviously, at some point, just getting stronger isn't going to improve those performances, right? So you're looking at improving explosive power, and yeah, squatting, let's say 250 kilos. If you're a 50 kilo athlete, like it's not going to necessarily improve if you get to 260 kilos. So when strength stops becoming the limiting factor or no longer improves performance, what kind of training can athletes do to keep improving their swimming type performance?
I think swimming is a really technical sport. So basically, getting stronger always changes your technique, because when you push harder, there will be a bigger imbalance in your body. So I think the main focus you get to do by then is the core. It's like all the kinetic chain effect. It's like if you push, your whole body needs to be it needs to be strong enough to let the energy flow through your body from your ankles to your shoulders. I think one of the big examples I can give is like in 2004, the big marks came with the fast swimsuits, and the most benefit the swimmers got from there is that they got more floating capacity, so they're being more on the water. And in, I guess, 2010, those suits were forbidden, or some of the materials were forbidden, because what they saw is when it wasn't a limited factor anymore to be really, really, really strong, because the suit solved the problem. So yeah, when the suit wasn't allowed anymore, people began focusing on the core again. And it, of course, when you get stronger, most of the times you get more heavy, and it's really, really important to keep floating good on the surface of the water, instead of it's like going down a bit. I think that's the main thing, the main limited factor in swimming. When you get stronger, you always need to be in the surface, and you can do that in like two ways. You can swim faster, like higher frequency your legs and arms, but also, yeah, there is also a limit. Sometimes you can't go faster because your coordination is not allowed to do that. So then you need to be more focusing on your core strength, I guess.
And I'm rudely interrupting to make sure you're up to date and aware of the Science of Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is a series of lectures. And I'm rudely interrupting to make sure you're up to date and aware of the Science of Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is an overgrowing library of sports science courses which are broken down into bite-sized chunks. So if you're enjoying today's podcast and you want to get your hands on some more great sports science information, all you have to do is hit the link in the show notes and you can get in there completely for free for the next 7 days. So hit that link when the podcast is finished. And what does then the core allow you to do technically, which allows you to stay above for longer? Because I'm not an expert at swimming, right? So I'm thinking like you kind of you come up a little bit and everything's a little bit more streamlined. But what's the core then doing in terms of either energy transfer or positioning within the swimming technique?
I think what the core does is it makes you more floating. So it gets you more up on the surface, because there's more cooperation between your legs, your hips, and your shoulders. Because like your legs and your hips, they make sure you stay on the surface, and with your arms you're pulling against the water. So if your core is not that good, there won't be a streamline. There will be like this or that. So every time you push, you're not pushing straight forward, so you're losing energy.
So it's like an inefficiency thing when you start to become less efficient with your stroke every time, and then eventually, yeah, you're either going to expend too much energy or you're not going to float optimally on top.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
And when it comes to training this, right? So I'm super interested in the nuts and bolts of this. You mentioned pulling against the water, so I imagine that's a key component of a strength training program. But can you talk us through what a training program for a swimmer might look like?
No, sure. Well, of course, first you're gonna focus on the upper back because they got a lot to do. So when you look at the push-pull ratio in the training I wrote, 9 out of 10 I do 1 push, 3 pulls, and that can be a vertical pull, that can be a horizontal pull, but more pulls than pushes. I think that's the main thing, especially when they only swimming breaststroke or only swimming freestyle. Of course, when they do the backstroke, that can be quite different, but that's another topic, another question. Of course, doing some squats, doing some deadlifts. Deadlifts also for the upper body strength. So make sure also on a heavy deadlift that they can maintain a good back, with being good straight back. Snatches, I really love snatches, not only because of the explosiveness of the power improvement, but also for the shoulder health. Because when you need to lock a weight going on full speed above your head, I think I think there are a lot of components in that shoulder who needs to work together to make sure it's going to be a technical good solution. So that's basically what I do, and especially, of course, depending on the period where you're in. So if we do some strength work, that's a lot of compound exercises. If we do a max block, also a lot of compound exercises. But when we make the transition to a power phase or something like that, of course we work a lot with medicine balls and stuff like that. Basically improving some power, improving some jumping. I think that's the main focus.
And you obviously mentioned how important the core is. What does it look like when it comes to core exercises? Because I completely understand the thought process behind snatches, squats, deadlifts, and some pulls. But the core can be quite specific, especially for swimming, right? Because you're not necessarily using your feet on the ground like you would do in other sports. So what does it look like in terms of core exercises?
Now, basically, we pull the core from the basic strength training. So we have most of the weeks we do 3 times a week. So we do strength training, but next to that, we have a core session before every swimming session. So that will be like 10 times a week. So we do
10 times a week.
10 times a week. We do some extra core strength next to the general strength training. And of course, when you do a heavy deadlift or a heavy back squat, your core needs to be fixed. You need to be braced, otherwise you got a problem. But make sure they can brace, make sure they're able to brace and stuff like that. That's one of the main elements we put in the warm-ups. So that's how we try to give the core some extra attention, so to make sure that when they get stronger, the core is always up to date to make sure they can handle the new strength.
I think that's a really interesting way of putting it as well, that you're not your bottleneck doesn't become something else, right? So you're developing those two qualities or two different areas of strength. at the same time. But what then? What does those sessions include? Because I can imagine 10 times a week, if you're just doing planks for 10 times a week, at some point they're going to be angry with you, right? Like they're not going to be happy. What kind of exercise are we talking about when it comes to the core?
Well, especially when they train in the morning, they're always angry, so that won't be a problem. But swimmers,
5 sessions
yeah,
sorted.
definitely. They start at 6 in the morning, so it's never a good session at that moment, and especially when you say, "Okay, let's go, guys." No, makes a difference. Like going from a burdock row to doing some things with the TRX or the red cord, with the Swiss balls. Yeah, I'm trying to variate a lot as we can, but sometimes you also need to give the athletes the time to adapt, right? So I don't want to make a circus out of it. So we try to do new stuff, but also to try to let the athletes involve, right? So if they see something on Instagram, sometimes you're looking at it and you're thinking, "Oh my God, where did I get it?" But I'm always trying to make the best out of it. Okay, how can I use this to make the training for them more entertaining, so they keep focused and they keep having fun with it. Well, especially when you do sometimes 10 times a week, it's not always fun, right? So yeah, basically that's it.
That's an excellent way of looking at it as well. Because when you get to session 10 of 10 on Friday or Saturday, and you're like, "Oh my God, I've got to do another plank." Like at some point, doing something that you want to do, or something that looks cool, or something that feels special.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
can imagine it makes a big difference. Like, although maybe from your point of view, it's not necessarily the best core exercise in the world. Maybe it's just the best exercise in that moment for that person.
Yeah, I truly believe in that.
Absolutely excellent. So, Michel, where can people find a little bit more about you and what you're up to?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not that good on the socials, so but I think when you look at the Dutch athletes for swimming and water polo, for example, they can find some cool exercises because those girls are really active on the socials.
Yeah.
I think when you go to my socials, you learn more about my private life, about my wife and my 3 kids than about my work experiences. So, but of course, if people want to know, I've got some questions or to chat about swimming and S&C and swimming, especially, I've got my LinkedIn, and I'm always open to chat.
Absolutely excellent. Michel, massive thanks for your time and effort. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
No, you're welcome, and good to see you again.
Yeah, you're not fed up of me yet.
No. Luckily, I'm not.
Good. Yeah, just. All right, cheers, buddy.
Cheers, bye-bye.
And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks to Michel for all of his hard work on today's podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm sure you do at home too. Before you leave, I want to point you in the direction of the Science and Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is an overgrowing library of sports science courses which are broken down into bite-sized chunks. So if you enjoyed today's podcast and you want to get your hands on some more great sports science information, all you have to do is hit the link in the show notes. You can get in there completely for free for the next 7 days. What's more, every time you complete one of the courses, you'll get a certificate of completion, which will prove your ongoing education. And if you have enjoyed today's podcast, it would be fantastic if you could recommend it to a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. That means that we can keep bringing the best possible guests and the best possible content. And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks from me. I'm Matt Solomon of Science of Sport, and I'll speak to you next week.